Welcome back. This is our Facebook time here at Domino Veterinary Hospital. And we have a guest in studio today, which is actually our waiting area. Judy Bernard,
Nice to
Proper
see you
Paws.
again.
Thanks for coming by. We're going to chat a little bit about dog training, but I'd like you to maybe tell your story a little bit.
Sure.
What's the name of your business and where are you at?
I own Proper Paws Dog Training here in West Concord.
Okay.
I've been in business for about 13 years now. Started as my third career. My first career was working in the business world. My second was raising my son. But when he went to school, we got a new puppy. And I found out that no dog training classes happened during the day when I was free.
Good point.
I had trained a dog and shown a dog in obedience trials prior to having this dog, and decided I was going to gather my friends and have puppy class. And one thing led to another.
Right.
And 13 years later, I have a business.
Is that still a popular time, Judy, to have the midday sessions?
You know, I find that there are plenty of people who are available during those times, particularly in this town and the surrounding areas. And I find that especially the stay-at-home moms really prefer to be able to do it then, because that's when they don't have their kids running around and it's a quieter time.
Free of distractions, right?
Yeah, and evenings and weekends, they have commitments. They're running around with the kids, and weekends they're doing things, so they're really looking for something during the day.
That's probably important for the dog who is the subject to not be distracted as well.
It absolutely is. It makes for a more relaxed situation not to have 4 or 5 people standing in the training area at the same time.
So where's your facility actually?
So the facility is off of the Herald Street, which is near the West Concord Post Office.
Okay.
And it's in the basement of 20 Herald Street. If you've ever been to the dance studio, you know where I am. I'm in the basement there.
Is that one of the big buildings on the right?
It is. It's the big old mill building.
I see.
Right across from the post office.
Yeah, and how often do you have these larger sessions in your facility? Is it daily, weekly? What kind of frequency?
We do group class lessons from 9:30 to 4:30 Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And then Mondays and Fridays, I do private appointments.
Right. Well, we have had quite a few clients who have mentioned that they're using your services on the private side, and that's a very good adjunct to the work that we do. We can do some assessment, but the hard work is really your purview. Can you speak about what happens when you go to a home and you work with a family with a problem situation? Particularly, I'm thinking about puppies and getting them on the straight and narrow, because there is quite a lot of learning, it appears, with puppies.
Oh, absolutely. And puppies are great because they're like sponges. And the sooner you get your puppy into training, the better, because it's easier to prevent bad behaviors than it is to remediate them.
That's true.
I do privates both for brand new puppies, and I also do privates for problem behaviors.
Okay.
All the way from dogs who don't come when called to aggression cases, so long as it is aggression that has not developed into biting yet.
Yeah, the biting is problematic, and that's probably a whole other topic. But what comes to my mind, Judy, would be what kind of a commitment of time? Because my clients would say, well, gee, that's nice, she's coming, but I don't know how much that's going to be financially, how much time commitment, how many repetitions will that take? Can you speak to that?
Depending on the situation. A typical puppy course of classes is 5 1-hour in-home privates.
Okay.
And in that time frame, we teach sit, down, stay, come, watch, touch, wait, and leash walking.
Leash walking.
As well as covering any problematic puppy behaviors you have, like nipping and jumping, house training, all of the basics that come along with just about every puppy
Well, I'm glad you mentioned leash walking, because I'm a huge believer in leash walking, and I think I learned that by working with our family dog, who is actually Paula, my daughter's dog. Frank is an excellent leash walker. And I see that as one of the most common issues in my practice is that dogs can't even do the fundamentals. They can't do sit, stay, but leash walking is so important and it's so enjoyable to walk your dog on a leash. Is that something you emphasize?
Absolutely. And probably the two most critical skills that you can teach a dog is walking nicely on a leash and a recall, which is come.
Wow,
And
that must be hard to train.
well, it can be. I think the thing that it takes most is it takes a commitment on the part of the pet owner
Right?
to be consistent. Leash
Okay.
walking is the least innate skill we train a dog to do, because they don't typically walk next to each other.
That
They
makes
walk
sense to
in
me.
Packs, and
Right.
they wander around and they come back to the pack.
Yeah.
And so this
I
whole
agree.
idea that we attach a dog to a leash is really very artificial. And so that takes a long time. It takes a commitment.
And people think that dogs do that naturally, and they're kind of dismissive very often when I say that's a really important skill and you should teach your dog to walk on a leash. And I said, what? Well, you know, it's almost the assumption that they come from
Well,
the
of course
factory
they're
that way.
going to, yeah. Well, and you know, that's a really good point. A lot of people, I think my biggest issue is people have a misconception about what puppies are going to do and how much effort it takes to go from puppy to adult dog.
It's a bit of a project, isn't it?
It is absolutely a project. It's
Yeah.
like having a new baby in the house.
It is.
And
Yeah.
all the effort that you put into your kids to get them from kindergarten up through college, you know, it's a shorter time frame and it's a little bit more straightforward because generally they don't argue back. But it is a commitment and it does take effort.
Is there any variability with regard to a dog's native intelligence or their comportment or personality? Do you find that some dogs are just naturally easier to train?
Well, yeah, you know, there's always going to be a variability. But if you find the dog's motivator,
The buttons to push.
any dog can be trained. And the dogs that get labeled stubborn, or the dogs that get labeled they're not listening, they know what to
Right.
do, they're not listening, generally are the smarter dogs who are independent thinkers.
That's what my colleague Dr. Cruz says. The smarter the dog, the more difficult it is.
Absolutely.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, the golden retrievers, I have golden retrievers, and they're lovely. But my first trainer said, you know, she's not very bright, but she's trainable. And, you know, I'll take a trainable dog any day.
Sure.
Because the ones that are really, really bright, you got to be really on top of them.
That's right. And I think one of the most common things that I struggle with is the dogs that jump up and embrace you like it's a bear walking on its back legs. Now, what is the secret sauce for making sure a dog doesn't jump up?
So the secret sauce is the secret sauce for everything, which is we reward the dog for doing the right thing, and we prevent the dog from doing the wrong thing.
Okay.
Because
Can you give me an example of prevention for, say, the jumping
Absolutely. Because if the
scenario?
dog is prevented, so if you have a puppy running around the house,
Right.
and the puppy's proclivity is to jump on everybody.
Right. And that's natural, I would think.
It absolutely is. It's
For
a
a dog.
greeting.
Yep.
It's a greeting.
Mm-hmm.
So if we put a leash on the dog and let them drag the leash around the house, and somebody comes toward the puppy, we can step on that leash and prevent the puppy from jumping on the leash. And what
Very
we do
good.
is we ask the person coming in,
Okay.
please don't touch the puppy until the puppy has calmed down. And then you step on the leash close enough so that the puppy can't jump up. And when the person reaches down to pet the dog, A, they can't jump up, and B,
Yep.
you've waited for the dog to settle down enough so that the dog is being reinforced for being calm and being settled and standing on the floor. I don't ask for sits until I train sit, and most little puppies can't do a sit yet. So we don't ask for a sit
Interesting.
with the babies. We wait for them to be calm, and then we pet them for being calm.
Now let's kind of go forward into some of the deeper waters. What happens when you have a family that presents you with an aggression or worse, a biting situation or interpersonal situation? We actually had an example of that today. We had an example of that earlier in the week in that a dog did bite another dog. So I'm wondering, at what level does a trainer go in these kinds of problems, and at what level do you recommend a veterinary behaviorist?
So generally, I have a lot of experience with dog-dog aggression. So I can take dog-dog aggression,
dog to dog, interdog.
Interdog
Okay.
aggression,
Yep.
fairly far. I will take a level 1 or level 2 bite, and the bite levels I'm talking about are Ian Dunbar's bite levels. He's got basically a severity of bites.
Is there a resource that people could look that scale up?
If you look up Ian Dunbar bite levels,
okay, Ian
you
Dunbar.
will see it.
All right.
A level 1 or 2 is harassment, or a level 2 bite is a puncture wound.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And so that's a fairly high bite, but
Yeah.
it's not to the point where the dog is clamping on and ripping and tearing. That we get into the 3, 4, and 5.
How seriously should families take a bite? Many people are worried about it, but then there's the other universe of people who say, "Oh, it's just a little nip. It's just a little bite." What should we counsel people?
A lot depends on the situation.
Okay.
There are bites that I look at and say, yeah, okay, the dog's ear got in the way.
Right.
The dogs were wrestling, they were having a good time,
Okay.
and the ear got in the way, and some people will freak out over those, and I understand that,
right.
There's blood involved.
Right.
But some are just accidents.
Okay.
Most of the time, if the dog is biting, you should be paying attention to it.
How does the maybe the edgy dog that could have the potential of biting interact with young families, younger humans, toddlers to say preschoolers or kindergartners?
We have to be really, really careful to keep the dogs and the kids apart.
Oh.
And supervise.
Because they usually want to mix, don't they?
Well, they do. And a lot of people think dogs and children are like ice cream in cones. And
right.
It's really more like oil and water.
Okay.
Kids don't have impulse control, neither do puppies.
Right.
Dogs and a lot of dogs, I'm sure you've seen it, there's a lot of rescue dogs coming up from the southeast.
There are a lot of those dogs.
A lot of them are very edgy. A lot of them are very fearful.
Exactly.
And a lot of that is the whole rescue process can be very traumatic.
And just parenthetically, I wanted to mention the reason for that, it seems, is that we don't have a really good source for local dogs. There's the demand exceeds the supply, unlike when I was first graduated.
We don't.
Isn't that correct?
Yep, in the Northeast, we've done a really good job on education for spay and neuter.
Right.
And so the dogs that we do have are dogs that are, generally speaking, not as desirable because it's mostly pitty mixes.
Oh, righto, yeah.
And so they're reaching out to other areas where their spay and neuter programs are not as well
and the basic socialization of these dogs, even if it's not good, is already in place. And you have what you have, right?
Yep, and they often bring these puppies up when they're right in the middle of their socialization, or worse, their first fear period.
Yes.
And so trauma induces this fear-based aggression. 90% of aggression, as you know, is fear-based.
Yeah.
These dogs are not bad dogs. They're just afraid.
Yeah.
And so it's all about controlling the circumstances.
Okay.
Keeping the kids, teaching the children how to interact appropriately with a puppy, and making sure that we set the puppy up to be, or the dog up to be, successful.
So having a dog is really not a passive thing. Owning a dog and managing a dog is an active sport, and especially it sounds like for puppies, particularly in the early developmental months, right?
Absolutely. And even some of the older rescues
Okay.
can be relatively problematic and need, you know, I said in the beginning, it's easier to train to develop good behaviors than it is to remediate bad.
Oh, so much so. The prevention piece of it is so important.
It's huge. And
there is hope for the rescue dog, right?
There absolutely.
With a longer time vision, I think, really.
But, you know, a lot of it is being empathetic for what the dog is going through and understanding these are not bad dogs. They are not inherently aggressive. They are fearful. And that takes a special approach.
Just as we conclude here, I was wondering if you had any general thoughts or messages that you would like to share is there something that comes up so frequently that you would just like to say, I wish people would think about this issue, or general comments about dog behavior?
You know, dog behavior is so varied. There is no general, but in terms of people, I hope people understand that it is not a piece of equipment when you get a dog.
Right.
It's not something you can put on the shelf. It does need to have its basic needs filled.
Right.
And that means a commitment on your part, not only to feed and keep the dog, the physical,
right,
but also the mental stimulation that a dog needs.
Mental stimulation, that's so true. Well, thanks for joining us, and I wanted
Thanks
to just have you tell us where you are located, maybe your contact information. Do you have a website?
Sure,
Can you give us that?
It's Proper Paws Dog Training. I'm at 20 Beharrell Street in Concord.
Okay.
And the website is www.ppdtt.biz.
Perfect.
That's the initials for Proper Paws Dog Training.
Very good. And what days do you have your sessions for the puppies?
Puppy sessions are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
Okay.
Thursdays is my puppy socialization class.
Puppy socialization, right on topic.
That is free for puppies between 8 and 18 weeks, and anybody can come as long as you've got Bordetella.
Okay, right? Perfect. Sounds good. Well, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks for joining us here at Domino Veterinary Hospital. Look forward to sharing with you next time. I'm Dr. Charles Bradley.